A boy thinks he rescued a puppy, then realizes it's not a dog. It had soft fur, sad eyes, and fit in the palm of his hand. He thought he was saving a helpless animal from the storm. But the moment he brought it home, the lights began to flicker, and something started watching from the woods. He was just trying to help. But now strange men are knocking at his door. His best friend says it's not safe. And the creature? It's changing. It's learning. This wasn't a rescue, it was an opening. And what's really looking for the creature isn't here to take it home. What did he bring into their world? And can he protect it before something far worse comes through? Your comments and presence here remind me why I tell these stories. If you still believe in the healing strength of love, truth, and quiet courage, then you're the reason this channel exists. The late afternoon sky darkened as angry clouds rolled in, bringing with them the deep rumble of distant thunder. Reed Flanagan pulled his worn jacket tighter around his shoulders as he hurried along the forest path toward home. He'd stayed too long at the creek, searching for interesting rocks to add to his collection, and now the storm was catching up to him. A bright flash lit up the sky, followed by a thunderous crack that made him jump. Fat raindrops began to fall, quickly soaking through his clothes. As he picked up his pace, a strange sound caught his attention, a soft whimpering coming from the undergrowth near the forest's edge. Reed stopped, squinting through the increasing downpour. There, huddled against the base of an old oak tree, was what looked like a small puppy. Its fuzzy body trembled as another thunderclap boomed overhead. "Hey there," Reed called softly, crouching down. "It's okay, little guy." The creature lifted its head, revealing oversized eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the growing darkness. Reed blinked, thrown off by its unusual appearance. It was shaped more like a piglet than a puppy, but its body was covered in soft fur that seemed to shimmer with subtle patterns he couldn't quite make out. Despite its strange looks, Reed's heart melted at how scared and helpless it appeared. He'd always been a sucker for injured animals, often bringing home hurt birds and rabbits to nurse back to health. His mom called it his saving things habit. "Come here," he coaxed, reaching out slowly. "I won't hurt you." To his surprise, the creature immediately wobbled toward him on unsteady legs. When Reed scooped it into his arms, it snuggled against his chest, making a sound somewhere between a purr and a chirp. "You're freezing," Reed said, tucking the small animal inside his jacket. "Don't worry. I'll take you home and get you warmed up." The storm intensified as Reed ran the rest of the way home, protecting his tiny passenger from the worst of the rain. Once inside, he grabbed an old towel from the laundry room and gently dried the creature off. "I think I'll call you Nubbins," he decided, watching as it nuzzled against his hand. "You're kind of nubby looking." That night, Reed made a cozy bed for Nubbins using an old shoebox and some soft blankets, placing it next to his own bed. He fell asleep to the sound of the storm and Nubbins' gentle breathing. When morning came, Reed woke to bright sunlight streaming through his window. As he stretched and sat up, something caught his eye. Dark marks on his windowsill that hadn't been there before. They looked like scorch marks, as if something hot had burned the white paint. Before he could investigate further, the lights in his room flickered and went out. From outside came the sound of confused neighbors discovering their power was out too. "That's weird," Reed muttered, but quickly forgot about it when Nubbins poked its head out of the shoebox and made an eager chirping sound. In the daylight, Reed could see his new pet even more clearly. There was something about its perfectly symmetrical features and the way faint patterns seemed to pulse beneath its fur that made it look unlike any animal he'd ever seen. Later that morning, Reed took Nubbins into the backyard, hoping to figure out what kind of food it might like. As he watched the creature investigate a flower bed, a sharp voice made him jump. "Good Lord in heaven!" Reed turned to see Mr. Talwick, his reclusive next-door neighbor, standing at the fence. The older man's face had gone pale, his deep-set eyes wide with recognition and fear as he stared at Nubbins. His weathered hands gripped the fence so tightly his knuckles turned white. Where did you find that? Mr. Talwick demanded, his voice shaking. He was wearing his usual threadbare army jacket despite the warm morning, and his unkempt beard couldn't hide how his jaw clenched with tension. In the woods during the storm, Reed answered, suddenly feeling protective of Nubbins. He was all alone and scared. Mr. Talwick's expression darkened. This is not what you think it is, boy, he said in a low, urgent voice. You need to be very careful. What do you mean? Reed asked, but Mr. Talwick was already backing away from the fence, shaking his head. Just be careful, he repeated, then turned and hurried back to his house, casting nervous glances over his shoulder. Reed watched him go, a knot forming in his stomach. He looked down at Nubbins, who was now pressed against his leg, making soft, trilling sounds. Despite Mr. Talwick's strange warning and the odd occurrences of the morning, Reed couldn't imagine giving up the creature he'd rescued. Don't worry, he whispered, reaching down to pat Nubbins' head. I won't let anything happen to you. Reed's heart pounded as he helped Nubbins climb the wooden ladder to his treehouse. The old oak structure had been his secret hideaway for years, and now it would be Nubbins' sanctuary, too. He'd spent the morning making it cozy, bringing up old blankets and pillows from the garage. You'll be safe here, Reed whispered, watching Nubbins explore the small space. The creature moved with more confidence now, its unusual symmetrical patterns glowing faintly in the shadows. That evening at dinner, Reed pushed his peas around his plate while his mother talked about her day at work. He could tell she sensed something was up. She kept giving him those looks that meant she knew he was hiding something. You've been spending an awful lot of time in that treehouse lately, she said carefully, studying his face. Everything okay? Yeah, Mom. Just working on some stuff up there. Reed tried to sound casual, but his voice cracked slightly. She raised an eyebrow but didn't push further. All right, honey. Just remember you can talk to me about anything. Reed nodded, guilt gnawing at his stomach. He hated keeping secrets from his mom, but Mr. Talwick's warning echoed in his mind. The next morning, Reed noticed black SUVs cruising slowly through the neighborhood. Men and women in dark green uniforms went door to door, carrying clipboards and official-looking badges. Through his bedroom window, he watched one of them talking to Mrs. Henderson next door. We're with the Department of Environmental Integrity, the woman was saying, her voice carrying across the yard. We're investigating reports of an invasive species in the area. Have you noticed any unusual animals recently? Reed's blood ran cold. He watched them install what looked like motion sensors along the tree line where he'd found Nubbins. As soon as they left his street, Reed grabbed his bike and pedaled as fast as he could to Maggie Renner's house. If there was anyone he could trust, it was his best friend. She answered the door with a pencil stuck behind her ear, her frizzy red hair escaping from its ponytail. Reed, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. I need to show you something, he said out of breath. But you have to promise to keep it secret. Maggie's green eyes narrowed. Is this about whatever you've been hiding in your treehouse? Reed stared at her. How did you… Please, she rolled her eyes. I've known you since kindergarten. You're not exactly subtle. Back at Reed's house, they climbed up to the treehouse. Nubbins was curled up in a nest of blankets but perked up when they entered. Maggie froze at the top of the ladder, her mouth falling open. What is that? She whispered. This is Nubbins, Reed said. I found him during the storm. Maggie inched closer, her scientific curiosity overtaking her initial shock. She pulled out the small notebook she always carried in her messenger bag. It's not like any animal I've ever seen. The symmetry is almost perfect, and those patterns… As they watched, Nubbins stood up and walked to a piece of paper Reed had left on the floor. Using its nose, it began to make marks on the paper. Not random scribbles, but deliberate lines forming simple shapes. That's impossible, Maggie breathed, scribbling frantically in her notebook. Then Nubbins did something that made them both gasp. It looked directly at Reed and said, in a perfect mimicry of his voice, "Safe here." Maggie dropped her notebook. "Did it just—" "Yeah." Reed nodded, his hands shaking. "He's been copying words I say to him, but this is the first time he's put them together like that." They watched in amazement as Nubbins continued drawing. The shapes began to form a crude but recognizable picture of the treehouse. "Reed," Maggie said slowly, her voice trembling slightly. "This isn't just some lost animal, this is something else entirely." She took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. "And those people in the SUVs? They're not really from Environmental Integrity, are they? They're looking for Nubbins." Reed nodded, relieved to finally share the burden of his secret. "Will you help me protect him?" Maggie looked at Nubbins, who was now watching them with those impossibly intelligent eyes. Despite the fear evident on her face, she nodded firmly. "Of course I will. That's what best friends are for." She pulled out her notebook again, flipping to a fresh page. "But if we're going to do this, we need to be smart about it. We need a plan." Reed felt tears of relief prick his eyes as he watched Maggie start making lists and drawing diagrams. He hadn't realized how scared and alone he'd felt until this moment, sharing his secret with someone who believed him. Nubbins chirped softly and waddled over to Maggie, gently headbutting her arm as if saying thank you. She laughed, despite herself, reaching out to pat its fuzzy head. "Well," she said, "I guess we're all in this together now." Reed was walking home from Maggie's house when he heard Mr. Talwick calling from his front porch. The old man stood there in his threadbare army jacket, looking more anxious than usual. "Boy," he said in a hoarse whisper, "we need to talk. Now." Reed hesitated. Mr. Talwick had always been the neighborhood mystery, the subject of endless playground rumors. But something in the man's deep-set eyes made Reed walk up the creaking porch steps. "It's about your friend," Mr. Talwick said, glancing around nervously. "The one you found in the storm." Reed's stomach tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't waste time denying it." Mr. Talwick opened his front door. "Come inside. There are things you need to know." The house smelled of old books and coffee. Maps and geological charts covered the walls, and stacks of weathered notebooks filled every surface. Mr. Talwick led Reed to a cluttered study and pulled out a dusty folder marked Classified. 15 years ago, he began, spreading out yellowed photographs. "I was part of a geological survey team at the quarry. We were doing routine core samples when we found something." His hands trembled as he pointed to a black and white image of what looked like a massive crack in the earth. "A chasm?" Reed asked, leaning closer. "Not just any chasm." Mr. Talwick's voice dropped even lower. "It went down deeper than any natural formation should. Our instruments couldn't find the bottom. And there was something else, readings we couldn't explain, energy signatures that defied everything we knew about physics." Reed's mouth went dry as Mr. Talwick continued. "They sealed it up, filled it with concrete and classified everything, but not before—" He trailed off, his weathered face pale. "Not before something came through." "What came through?" Reed whispered, though he had a feeling he already knew. "We never saw it clearly, just shadows, movements in the dark. But after that, strange things started happening. Equipment failures, unexplained lights, people going missing near the quarry." Mr. Talwick ran a hand through his gray hair. "I quit after they covered it up. Couldn't be part of the lie. But I stayed in town, watching, waiting. And now what? Now your little friend has appeared, and those aren't really federal agents out there." Mr. Talwick pointed through his window at a black SUV rolling past. "There's something else. Something that's been waiting for this moment for 15 years. Reed's heart hammered in his chest. "What do they want with Nubbins?" "Nubbins?" Mr. Talwick almost smiled. Is that what you named it? His expression grew serious again. Listen to me carefully, Reed. Your friend, it's not from here, not from anywhere on Earth. That chasm? It wasn't just a hole in the ground, it was a door to somewhere else, somewhere that was never meant to connect with our world. Reed thought about Nubbins' strange symmetry, its impossible intelligence, the way it glowed in the dark. But Nubbins isn't dangerous. He's gentle. He's my friend. Maybe so, Mr. Talwick nodded, but what's hunting him might not be. A chill ran down Reed's spine. Hunting him? Why do you think it was out in that storm? Something drove it here. Something followed it. Mr. Talwick gripped Reed's shoulder. Those people watching your house, they know. They've been preparing for this since we sealed that chasm. Reed jumped up. I have to move him. Keep him safe. Wait. Mr. Talwick hurried to a cabinet and pulled out an old map. There's an abandoned hunting shack here. He circled a spot deep in the forest. It's well hidden, hard to find if you don't know where to look. Take your friend there. That night, Reed couldn't sleep. He watched through his window as another black SUV drove past, moving slowly, its headlights sweeping across his front yard. At midnight, he crept out to the treehouse. Come on, Nubbins, he whispered. We have to go. The creature seemed to understand the urgency. It followed Reed silently through the dark woods, its faint glow dimmed as if it knew to stay hidden. The old hunting shack was exactly where Mr. Talwick had marked it, almost invisible among the thick trees. Inside, Reed spread out the blankets he'd brought in his backpack. It's just for a little while, he told Nubbins, trying to sound braver than he felt. Until we figure out what to do. Nubbins made a soft chirping sound and pressed against Reed's hand. In the creature's oversized eyes, Reed saw something that looked like understanding and fear. As Reed walked home in the pre-dawn darkness, his mind spun with everything Mr. Talwick had told him. A door to another world. Something hunting Nubbins. And somewhere out there, watching and waiting, were people who had been preparing for this moment for 15 years. He looked back at the forest, now hiding his strange friend, and wondered what else had come through that ancient chasm, moving in shadows, waiting to be discovered. The morning after moving Nubbins to the hunting shack, Reed met Maggie at the edge of her backyard. Dark circles under his eyes showed he hadn't slept much. We need Mr. Talwick's help, Reed said, kicking at a pine cone. He knows more than he's telling us. Maggie adjusted her canvas messenger bag, stuffed with notebooks as usual. Are you sure we can trust him? We don't have a choice. They found Mr. Talwick in his backyard, digging through a rusty metal shed. Cobwebs clung to his army jacket as he emerged with an old cardboard box. I've been expecting you to, he said, setting the box on a weathered picnic table. These might help us understand what we're dealing with. Inside the box were old maps marked with strange symbols and what looked like handheld radiation detectors from decades ago. Maggie picked one up, her green eyes sharp with curiosity. Do these still work? She asked. Some do. Talwick pulled out a device that looked like a compass, but with additional dials and a faintly glowing screen. This one's been acting strange lately. The readings are off the charts. Reed leaned closer. What does it measure? Energy signatures, the kind we found near the breach. Talwick's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the dials. I've been taking readings around town. There's a hot zone near the old quarry. We should check it out, Maggie said, already scribbling notes. It's dangerous, Talwick warned. Those agents are watching everything. But we have to do something, Reed insisted. Nubbins needs our help. Talwick sighed, then nodded. First, let's see how your friend reacts to this equipment. Maybe it can tell us more. They hiked to the hunting shack, following a winding path to avoid being seen. Inside, Nubbins was curled up on Reed's blankets, its fuzzy body giving off a faint glow. When Talwick pulled out the compass-like device, Nubbins immediately perked up. The creature moved closer, its oversized eyes fixed on the glowing screen. The device's needle began spinning wildly. "Incredible," Talwick whispered. "It's responding to him." Nubbins reached out one small paw toward the device. The moment they touched, the screen flared brilliantly, and Nubbins made a sound none of them had heard before, a high, clear note that made the air vibrate. "What was that?" Maggie asked, her voice hushed. "A connection," Talwick said. "Your friend isn't just lost, it's trying to find something, or someone." He looked at Reed with grave eyes. "If it came through, others may follow." "What do you mean, others?" Reed felt his stomach tighten. The breach might not be fully sealed, and if Nubbins found a way through… Talwick didn't finish the thought. They spent the afternoon studying Talwick's maps, marking locations where the radiation readings spiked. The pattern centered on the abandoned quarry, forming a spiral of energy hotspots. "We need to investigate the quarry," Maggie said, connecting dots on the map with her pencil. "Tonight, before those agents figure out what we're doing." They made plans to meet at sunset. Reed would bring Nubbins. They needed the creature's reactions to guide them. Maggie packed her bag with flashlights and snacks. Talwick gathered his equipment. But as the sun began to set, everything went wrong. Reed was heading to the meeting spot when he heard engines rumbling. 3 black SUVs pulled up to Talwick's house. Men in dark suits emerged, surrounding the building. Reed ducked behind a hedge, his heart pounding. Through gaps in the leaves, he watched as they led Talwick out in handcuffs. "Herbert Talwick," one agent announced loudly. "You're being detained for violation of national security protocols and unauthorized possession of classified materials." Talwick caught Reed's eye for just a moment as they led him past. His expression was clear. "Stay hidden. Protect Nubbins." The SUVs drove away, leaving Reed alone in the growing darkness. He ran to Maggie's house, nearly crashing into her as she rushed out her back door. "Did you see?" she asked, breathless. "They took him." Reed's voice shook. "What do we do now?" Maggie grabbed his arm. "We stick to the plan. We need to find out what's happening at that quarry before they stop us." "But without Mr. Talwick, we have his maps, his equipment, and we have Nubbins." Maggie's green eyes flashed with determination. "We're not giving up." Reed nodded slowly. They were on their own now, 2 kids and a creature from another world, facing something bigger and more dangerous than they'd imagined. But they had no choice. Somewhere in the abandoned quarry, answers were waiting, and time was running out. "Tonight," Reed said. "We go tonight." Maggie squeezed his hand. "Tonight." They watched another black SUV cruise slowly past, its tinted windows reflecting the last rays of sunlight. In the distance, storm clouds were gathering again, dark and heavy with rain. Reed and Maggie ran until their legs burned, ducking through backyards and side streets to avoid the black SUVs that now seemed to be everywhere. When they finally stopped to catch their breath behind old Mrs. Peterson's garden shed, Maggie's face was as red as her frizzy hair. "We need to check on our houses," she whispered, clutching her messenger bag. "My notebooks." Reed nodded, his heart still racing. "Be careful. Meet me at the creek in 1 hour." They split up, taking different routes home. As Reed approached his house, something felt wrong. The front door was slightly ajar, and his mother's flower pots were knocked over. Inside, his stomach dropped. Every drawer was pulled open, clothes and papers scattered across the floor. His room was the worst. The mattress overturned, his desk ransacked, even the air vent cover had been removed. "Reed!" His mother's voice made him jump. She stood in the doorway, her face pale and worried. "Where have you been?" Some men came, saying they were from the government. They were looking for a dog? Reed's mind raced. He forced his voice to stay steady. I lost him. The puppy I found. He ran away yesterday. They seemed to think this was about more than just a lost dog. His mother crossed her arms. Reed, what's really going on? Nothing, Mom, I promise. The lie felt like sand in his mouth, but he thought of Nubbins, of Mr. Talwick being taken away. I'm just upset about losing him. His mother didn't look convinced, but before she could press further, his phone buzzed. A text from Maggie. My house too. Everything's torn apart. Parents freaking out. Meet tonight? Reed texted back a quick yes and told his mother he was tired. He helped clean up his room, each minute dragging like an hour, waiting until the house grew quiet. Finally, well past midnight, Reed lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling. The house creaked and settled around him. His mother's soft snoring drifted from down the hall. A sudden tapping at his window made him bolt upright. There was Nubbins, its fuzzy body glowing faintly in the darkness, small paws pressed against the glass. Reed quickly let the creature in. Nubbins was trembling, its oversized eyes wider than usual. The bioluminescent patterns on its body were pulsing rapidly, something Reed had never seen before. What's wrong? Reed whispered, gathering the creature in his arms. Nubbins made a series of distressed chirping sounds, then, to Reed's astonishment, spoke actual words. Danger. From Sky. Reed nearly dropped Nubbins in shock. The voice was soft and musical, unlike any sound he'd heard before. You can talk? Danger, Nubbins repeated, more urgently. Not friends, hunters. Hunters? Reed's mouth went dry. You mean, more are coming? To help you? Nubbins shook its head, the movement almost human-like. To destroy me, destroy, witnesses. Reed sat heavily on his bed, his mind spinning. The government agents, they know something's coming? Try to hide truth, too late. Nubbins pressed closer to Reed, its small body shivering. Sorry, didn't want to bring danger. Reed hugged Nubbins tighter, feeling the creature's fear and something else, a deep sadness. All this time, Nubbins had known the danger it was bringing, but had been unable to communicate it. It's not your fault, Reed whispered fiercely. We're going to figure this out. I won't let anything happen to you. Nubbins looked up at him with those huge, intelligent eyes. Promise? I promise. And in that moment, Reed knew he meant it more than anything he'd ever said in his life. This wasn't just about protecting a strange creature anymore. This was about standing up for what was right, about protecting someone who trusted him. He thought about Mr. Talwick being taken away, about the ransacked houses, about all the lies and cover-ups. The government wasn't trying to protect people. They were trying to hide something huge, something that could change everything. We need to tell Maggie, Reed said, reaching for his phone. She needs to know what we're really dealing with. Nubbins nodded, then suddenly stiffened, its patterns flashing brightly. They come soon. Very soon. Reed looked out his window at the clear night sky, wondering what was up there, heading towards their small town. Whatever it was, he knew now that he couldn't back down. Nubbins had chosen to trust him, and he would not break that trust. He held the creature close, feeling its heartbeat against his chest. Tomorrow they would face whatever was coming. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of his room, Reed made a silent vow to protect his friend, no matter what the cost. The weight of this promise settled over him like a heavy blanket. But strangely, he felt stronger for it. Sometimes, he realized, the biggest choices in life weren't choices at all. They were simply the right thing to do. Reed and Maggie crouched behind a stack of wooden crates, watching the white mobile lab truck parked at the edge of the quarry. Two agents in dark suits stood guard outside, their earpieces gleaming in the afternoon sun. Are you sure about this? Maggie whispered, clutching her messenger bag. Her green eyes were sharp with worry. If we get caught, we have to try, Reed said. Mr. Talwick's the only one who really understands what's happening. He glanced down at Nubbins, who was nestled in his jacket. The creature's bioluminescent patterns pulsed softly, responding to their tension. Nubbins chirped quietly, understanding its role. Reed set it down behind the crates. Remember what we practiced? The creature nodded, its oversized eyes focused and determined. It scampered off toward the electrical junction box near the truck, keeping to the shadows. I still can't believe it can understand us so well, Maggie muttered, pulling out her notebook where she'd sketched their makeshift rescue plan. Suddenly, the lights on the mobile lab flickered. The computer equipment inside made strange whirring sounds, and the radio communications crackled with static. The agents looked around, confused. Now, Reed whispered. They darted toward the back of the truck while the agents walked toward the junction box, speaking urgently into their radios. Maggie pulled out a paperclip she'd straightened into a makeshift lockpick, something she'd learned from one of her mystery novels. Hurry, Reed urged, keeping watch. The lock clicked open. They slipped inside the dimly lit lab, finding Mr. Talwick handcuffed to a metal chair. His weathered face lit up with surprise, then concern. Kids, you shouldn't be here, he said, his voice hoarse. It's too dangerous. We're getting you out, Reed said firmly, while Maggie worked on the handcuffs. Nubbins is creating a distraction. Talwick's eyes widened. The creature's here. That's even more dangerous. They have equipment that can detect its energy signature. The handcuffs finally sprang open. Talwick rubbed his wrists and quickly moved to one of the computer stations. Wait, he said, his fingers flying over the keyboard. There's something here, something they didn't want me to see. We don't have time, Maggie insisted, but Talwick was already pulling up files. Look at this, he breathed, pointing to technical drawings on the screen. It's an energy gate, similar to what we found in the quarry years ago, but manufactured. They've been trying to recreate the breach. Reed leaned closer, studying the complex diagrams. Could it send Nubbins home? Theoretically, Talwick said, quickly downloading files onto a thumb drive. But it's highly unstable. The power requirements alone could cause a massive surge, maybe even an explosion. And worse, he paused, his face grim. If we activate it, it'll be like lighting a beacon. Whatever's out there looking for your friend will know exactly where to find us. A loud bang from outside made them all jump. The lights flickered again, more violently this time. We need to go, Maggie urged. Now? They slipped out the back of the truck. Reed whistled softly, and Nubbins emerged from behind the junction box, running to them on its stubby legs. The creature looked tired from its efforts, its glow dimmer than usual. They ran toward the tree line, Talwick leading them through a hidden path he seemed to know by heart. Behind them, they could hear shouts of alarm as their escape was discovered. When they finally stopped in a small clearing, all of them breathing hard, Talwick pulled out the thumb drive. This gate, he said, it might be our only chance, but the risks. What risks exactly? Maggie asked, pulling out her notebook again. The gate requires massive amounts of power. If it fails, the energy release could be catastrophic. And even if it works, it'll draw attention, not just from the agents, but from whatever's hunting Nubbins. Reed looked down at Nubbins, who was pressing against his leg, trembling slightly. The creature looked up at him and spoke softly. Others come. Soon. Very soon. Talwick stared at Nubbins in amazement. It can speak now? Just started, Reed explained. That's how we knew something worse was coming. Something that wants to destroy any evidence that Nubbins exists. Then we're running out of time, Talwick said grimly. The gate might be our only option, dangerous as it is. But we'll need help to pull it off, and a power source strong enough to activate it. The old power station, Maggie suggested, flipping through her notebook. The one they shut down last year. It still has all the equipment, and my dad said they never fully decommissioned it. Talwick nodded slowly. That might work. But we'd need to move fast. Once we start powering up the gate, we'll have very little time. Reed felt Nubbins shiver against his leg. He knelt down beside the creature, seeing the fear in its oversized eyes. "We'll find a way," he promised softly. "Whatever it takes." The old pickup truck groaned under the weight of the stolen gate device as they drove through the darkening afternoon. Reed sat in the back seat with Nubbins curled up in his lap, while Talwick drove and Maggie navigated using her father's old maps. "Turn left here," Maggie directed, pointing to a dirt road that led toward the quarry. "The power station's connection points are still active there." Reed stroked Nubbins' fuzzy head, noticing how the creature's usual warm glow had dimmed to barely a flicker. "Something's wrong with him," he said, worry creeping into his voice. "He's getting weaker." Talwick glanced in the rearview mirror. "The gate's energy signature must be affecting him. They're probably linked somehow. Same frequency, same source." The truck bounced along the uneven road, each jolt making the gate equipment rattle in the truck bed. Reed held Nubbins closer, feeling the creature's rapid heartbeat against his chest. When they reached the quarry, the sky had taken on an unusual purple tinge. Thick clouds swirled overhead in unnatural patterns, like water circling a drain. "We need to hurry," Talwick said, jumping out of the truck. "Those atmospheric disturbances aren't natural." They worked quickly, unloading the gate and connecting it to the old power station's junction box. Maggie ran cables while Talwick calibrated the equipment. Reed stayed with Nubbins, who had become so weak it could barely stand. "Just hold on," Reed whispered to his friend. "We're going to get you home." Strange lights began to dance across the clouds, ribbons of green and blue that twisted like northern lights. But these weren't beautiful or peaceful. They felt wrong, threatening. "Power levels are rising," Talwick called out, checking the readings on his borrowed equipment. "The gate's starting to respond." A high-pitched whine filled the air, making Reed's teeth ache. Nubbins suddenly jerked upright, its eyes wide with terror. "Here," it whispered. "It here." The clouds above them split apart like torn fabric. Through the gap, something massive and dark plummeted toward the earth. Reed's heart nearly stopped as the shape unfurled in mid-fall, a creature that looked like it had been built from razor blades and shadows. It landed with an earth-shaking impact 50 feet away, its angular limbs unfolding like a nightmarish spider. Each movement produced a sound like scraping metal. Its body was covered in what looked like black chrome, reflecting the strange lights above in twisted patterns. "Oh my God," Maggie whispered, dropping the cable she'd been holding. The predator's head swiveled toward them, revealing no eyes, but rather a collection of sharp angles that somehow gave the impression of cruel intelligence. It took a step forward, its blade-like legs cutting into the ground. "Keep working!" Talwick shouted, frantically adjusting the gate's controls. "We need another 2 minutes!" The creature launched itself forward with frightening speed. Reed froze, unable to move as death itself seemed to rush toward him. But suddenly Nubbins was there, standing between Reed and the monster despite barely being able to stay upright. A pulse of energy erupted from Nubbins' small body, the brightest glow Reed had ever seen from his friend. The predator staggered back, its metallic form vibrating as if struck by an invisible force. But the effort cost Nubbins dearly. The creature collapsed, its glow fading to almost nothing. Reed snapped out of his paralysis and ran to his friend, scooping up the nearly lifeless body. The predator recovered quickly, readying itself for another attack. But this time, Reed didn't run. He stood his ground, holding Nubbins close, positioning himself between his friend and the monster. Fear coursed through his body, but he refused to move. "You want him?" Reed shouted, his voice cracking but determined. "You'll have to go through me first." The predator paused, as if confused by this small creature's defiance. Its head tilted slightly, studying Reed with its eyeless face. "Reed!" Maggie screamed. "Get back!" But Reed stood firm, remembering how Nubbins had protected him that first night, how it had warned them of danger, how it had just sacrificed itself to save them all. He wouldn't abandon his friend now. The predator took another step forward, its blade limbs rising like scythes. Reed could feel Nubbins trembling in his arms, but he didn't move. He couldn't. Sometimes protecting someone meant being brave even when you were terrified. The monster towered over them now, its shadow falling across Reed and Nubbins like a dark curtain. Reed closed his eyes, holding Nubbins tighter, waiting for whatever would come next. Behind Reed, the gate's energy field crackled and pulsed, growing larger with each surge. The air itself seemed to twist and bend around the widening portal, creating a swirling vortex of otherworldly light. "The power readings are off the charts!" Maggie shouted over the deafening hum. She edged closer to the gate's control panel, trying to help Talwick stabilize the failing equipment. The ground beneath their feet trembled as reality itself began to warp and buckle. A sudden surge sent Maggie stumbling backward toward the growing rift. Her feet slipped on loose gravel, and she screamed as she began to fall toward the swirling void. Reed's heart stopped as he watched his best friend about to be swallowed by the portal. Talwick lunged forward, catching Maggie's arm just before she fell in. He yanked her to safety, but the movement put him directly in the predator's path. The creature's blade-like limb slashed across Talwick's side, sending him sprawling across the quarry floor. "Mr. Talwick!" Reed cried out, still clutching Nubbins. The old man pressed his hand against his bleeding side. "Keep going!" he gasped. "Don't let it all be for nothing!" The predator thrashed wildly now, its metallic body reflecting the chaotic energies surrounding them. Loose rocks and debris began lifting off the ground, pulled toward the destabilizing portal. The creature's movements became more frenzied, as if the gate's energy was driving it into a rage. Its eyeless face snapped toward Nubbins, finally locating its true target. Reed could feel his friend trembling weakly in his arms, barely conscious but still alive. The predator launched itself forward, its razor limbs extended for the kill. Without thinking, Reed spun around, shielding Nubbins with his own body. He felt the rush of air as the creature's bladed arm swept past, missing him by inches. "I won't let you hurt him," Reed shouted, though his voice shook with fear. The gate's core made a sound like shattering glass. Reality rippled around them as the portal's stability failed completely. Equipment, rocks, and loose debris spiraled through the air, drawn inexorably toward the breach. The predator dug its blade legs into the ground, fighting against the pull while still trying to reach Nubbins. In Reed's arms, Nubbins stirred. The creature's dim glow suddenly intensified, and Reed felt a warmth spread through his chest. Nubbins was drawing on its last reserves of strength. "No," Reed whispered, understanding what his friend intended to do. "You're too weak." But Nubbins had made its choice. It pushed free from Reed's arms, standing on shaky legs between its friend and the portal. Its small body began to pulse with waves of pure energy, not attacking this time, but reaching out to connect with the gate's failing core. The chaotic energy stabilized, the wild fluctuations smoothing into a steady flow. The predator screeched, a sound like tearing metal, as Nubbins' power pushed it backward toward the portal. Its blade legs scraped deep furrows in the ground as it fought against the force, but it couldn't resist. The creature's angular form began to break apart as it reached the gate's threshold. Tendrils of destructive energy coursed along its metallic skin, causing pieces to crack and splinter away. With one final screech, the predator was pulled through the portal, disappearing into the swirling void. Reed stumbled forward. "Nubbins, you did it! You can stop now!" But Nubbins turned to face him, and Reed saw in his friend's oversized eyes that this was goodbye. The small creature's glow had faded to almost nothing. It had used everything it had left to save them. "Thank friend," Nubbins whispered, its voice barely audible over the portal's hum. "Please," Reed begged, tears streaming down his face. "Don't go!" Nubbins took an unsteady step toward the gate, then paused. It turned back one last time, meeting Reed's gaze. In that moment, Reed saw everything they had shared. The trust, the friendship, the unconditional love that had grown between them. Then Nubbins stepped through the portal and vanished. The gate's energy field collapsed in on itself, shrinking rapidly until it winked out of existence with a final burst of light. The strange clouds above dispersed, leaving only normal evening sky. The quarry fell silent, except for the sound of scattered debris settling to the ground and Reed's quiet sobs. The gate's collapse was violent and sudden. The swirling vortex of energy imploded with a thunderous crack, sending out a shockwave that knocked Reed, Maggie, and the injured Talwick off their feet. When the dust settled, all that remained was a blackened crater in the quarry floor, wisps of smoke rising from its edges. Reed stayed on his knees at the crater's edge, his hands pressed against the scorched earth where the portal had been. Tears streamed down his face as the reality sank in. Nubbins was gone. Really gone. Maggie knelt beside him, her own eyes wet with tears, and wrapped an arm around his shoulders. "He saved us," she whispered. "He saved everyone." Behind them, Talwick groaned in pain, clutching his injured side. The sound snapped them back to the immediate crisis. They helped the old man to his feet, supporting him between them as they made their slow way back to the truck. The drive to the hospital was tense. Every few minutes, Maggie checked the rearview mirror, expecting to see government vehicles in pursuit. But the roads were eerily empty. They pulled up to the emergency entrance, where the staff quickly whisked Talwick away on a gurney. Reed and Maggie waited in the sterile hospital corridor, both too exhausted to speak. Hours passed. Occasionally, men in dark suits would walk past, speaking in hushed tones into their phones. But none of them approached or questioned the children. Finally, a doctor emerged to tell them Talwick was stable. "Just some deep lacerations," she explained. "He'll need to stay for observation, but he should make a full recovery." They were allowed a brief visit. Talwick lay in the hospital bed, looking smaller and more fragile than Reed had ever seen him, but his eyes were alert and knowing. "They're pulling out," Talwick said quietly, nodding toward the window where a black SUV was leaving the parking lot. "The cover-up has already begun. By tomorrow, none of this will have officially happened." He was right. The next morning's local newspaper carried a small article about a gas leak near the old quarry that had caused a minor explosion and structural collapse. The Department of Environmental Integrity representatives had concluded their investigation and left town. The power outages were blamed on storm damage. Reed's mother hugged him tight when he finally came home, relieved that he was safe but confused by his subdued demeanor. "I heard about that gas leak," she said. "Thank goodness you weren't near there when it happened." He wanted to tell her everything, about Nubbins, about the truth, about how brave and wonderful his friend had been. But he knew he couldn't. Some truths were too big, too strange for the normal world to accept. The weight of that secret settled heavily on his young shoulders. The following days felt surreal. Reed and Maggie went back to school, sat through classes, did their homework, all while carrying the knowledge of what had really happened. They would catch each other's eyes across the classroom, sometimes, sharing silent understanding. During lunch breaks, they sat together in their usual spot under the oak tree, but their conversations were different now. They spoke in quiet tones about what they'd witnessed, trying to process it all. "Do you think he made it home okay?" Reed asked one day, pushing his sandwich around on its wrapper. Maggie considered this carefully. "He was smart and brave and stronger than anyone knew. I think he did." "I keep feeling guilty," Reed admitted. "Like maybe if I'd done something different, he could have stayed." "Reed." Maggie's voice was firm but gentle. "You gave him a home when he was lost and scared. You protected him when others would have hurt him. And in the end, he chose to protect us too. That's what friends do." Tears welled in Reed's eyes, but he managed a small smile. Yeah, I guess you're right. They visited Talwick in the hospital regularly until he was released. The old man seemed changed by the experience, less haunted somehow, as if facing his past fears had finally allowed him to let them go. The breach is sealed now, he told them during one visit. Whatever came through before, whatever they were studying back then, it's over. Nubbins made sure of that. The world moved on, as it always does. The scorched crater in the quarry was filled in. The motion sensors in the woods were removed. Power returned to normal. Soon, most people forgot there had ever been anything strange happening in their small town. But Reed would never forget. At night, he would look out his window at the stars, wondering if somewhere out there, in some other dimension or world, Nubbins was doing the same. The wonder of it all, the reality that the universe was so much bigger and stranger than most people knew, filled him with a quiet awe. His mother noticed the change in him. "You seem different lately," she said one evening. "More serious?" Reed just shrugged. "I guess I'm growing up." The truth was, he had grown up. Not in the usual way, but in the way that comes from facing something extraordinary and carrying that experience forward. He and Maggie had seen behind the curtain of normal reality, and that knowledge had changed them forever. Their friendship, already strong before, had been forged into something unbreakable by what they'd shared. They didn't need to talk about it constantly. The understanding was there in every shared look, every inside joke about gas leaks, every quiet moment of remembrance. In time, the sharp edge of loss began to dull. Reed could think about Nubbins without crying, could remember the good moments, the drawings, the first words, the pure joy of discovery, without being overwhelmed by sadness. But he never stopped missing his friend, and he never stopped wondering about the vastness of the universe and the mysteries it held. The world had returned to normal, but normal would never mean quite the same thing again. 3 days after the incident at the quarry, Reed climbed up to his treehouse for the first time since everything had happened. The wooden structure felt different now, emptier, quieter. Afternoon sunlight filtered through the planks, creating patterns on the floor where he and Nubbins had spent so many hours together. He ran his hand along the wall where Nubbins had made his first attempts at drawing, tracing the faint marks with his fingertips. The memory brought a familiar ache to his chest, but it wasn't as sharp as before. That's when something caught his eye, a soft, pulsing glow coming from behind an old comic book. Reed's heart skipped a beat. Moving carefully, as if approaching a wild animal, he reached for the source of the light. There, nestled in a corner, was a smooth stone about the size of his palm. It radiated a gentle, bluish-white luminescence that reminded him of the patterns that had swirled across Nubbins' fur when he was excited or happy. The stone was warm to the touch, almost alive. As Reed turned it over in his hands, his breath caught in his throat. Etched into its surface were intricate symbols, circles and lines that seemed to shift and flow like water. But among these alien markings were 2 words in clear English. "Thank you, Nubbins." Tears welled up in Reed's eyes, but this time they weren't entirely from sadness. He held the stone close to his chest, feeling its gentle warmth spread through him. In that moment, something that had been knotted up inside him began to unwind. "You're welcome," he whispered to the empty treehouse, his voice thick with emotion. "I'd do it all again." And he meant it. Despite the danger, despite the fear and loss, he wouldn't change his decision to help Nubbins that stormy night. The realization settled over him like a warm blanket. Nubbins had never been a pet to keep, or a secret to guard. He had been a friend who needed help, and Reed had been brave enough to give it. Moving with purpose now, Reed went to his special hiding spot, a loose board in the treehouse floor. From beneath it, he pulled out an old tin box decorated with rocket ships and stars. Inside were his most precious treasures: a lucky penny his grandfather's compass, a smooth river stone Maggie had given him on his 10th birthday. He placed Nubbin's glowing stone carefully among these treasures, watching how its soft light played across the other objects. It felt right here, among the things that mattered most to him. As he closed the lid, the metal caught the stone's glow for a moment, making the painted rockets seem to shine as if they were really soaring through space. Reed sat back against the treehouse wall, letting out a long breath. The weight he'd been carrying since Nubbins left, the guilt, the doubt, the wondering if he could have done more, began to lift. For the first time since that night at the quarry, he felt truly at peace. He understood now what Nubbin's message really meant. It wasn't just a thank you for the shelter or the protection. It was an acknowledgement of something deeper. The courage it took to help someone different, to stand up against forces much bigger than himself, to do what was right even when it was hard. Looking out through the treehouse window at the forest beyond, Reed felt different, stronger. The world hadn't changed. The trees were the same, the sky was the same, his small town was the same. But he had changed. He had faced something extraordinary and chosen to be brave. That choice had mattered, had made a difference not just to Nubbins, but to himself. He pulled his knees up to his chest, smiling through the last of his tears. The treehouse would always be special now, not because it had been a hiding place for an alien creature, but because it was where he had learned what real bravery meant. Not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. The stone's glow pulsed one final time through the cracks in the tin box, as if saying goodbye. Reed placed his hand on the box, feeling the lingering warmth. "Goodbye, Nubbins," he whispered. "Thank you, too." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, Reed carefully replaced the box beneath the floorboard. He wasn't the same kid who had first built this treehouse with his mom's help. He was someone who had seen beyond the ordinary world, who had made choices that mattered, who had learned what it meant to be truly brave. He climbed down from the treehouse with steady hands and a full heart, ready to face whatever came next. The message in the stone had given him something precious, not just closure, but understanding. Some friendships, no matter how brief, change us forever. And sometimes being brave means letting go. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay with you.